When Meghan Markle first went to Kensington Palace and, she had the apartments there, the one thing that the staff noticed was the way that she sort of lingered and looked around and looked at all the artifacts and very much took in everything that was around her.
She says she values privacy above everything. She fought for it. She left the country for it. She cited it as the reason she would not stand on hospital steps, would not show her children's faces, would not participate in the machinery of royal public life. And yet, according to a well-researched new biography drawing on access to senior royal sources, she spent her time inside Kensington Palace, Windsor Castle, and the private rooms of the British monarchy with her phone out. Recording, not selfies, not casual snaps for personal memory, footage, staff interactions, rooms, artifacts, conversations. Privacy, it seems, was always a principle that applied to everyone except Meghan Markle herself. But here is the part of this story that has been almost entirely missed, the legal reality that turns this from a bombshell into something considerably less explosive than it appears. Even if she recorded everything she wanted to record, she cannot use any of it. Let me explain exactly why. The first contradiction: what she said versus what she did. When Meghan Markle arrived at Kensington Palace for the first time, staff noticed something. She moved through those rooms with a particular kind of attention, taking in the scale of the apartments that William and Catherine occupied, comparing, processing, and frequently reaching for her phone. Now, many people walk into historic spaces and want to capture them. That is not, on its own, remarkable. What made it notable to those working in those environments was the consistency of it, the regularity, the way it extended beyond the kind of casual documentation that anyone might do in an extraordinary setting, into something that felt more deliberate, more systematic. Staff in those environments tend to come from particular backgrounds. They are trained to be discreet, to absorb the unusual without reacting, to manage difficult situations with quiet diplomacy rather than confrontation. They are not, as a rule, people who push back, which meant that Meghan's habit of filming, turning her phone on herself in palace corridors, capturing rooms, recording interactions with staff as she gathered information about how the institution operated, went largely unchallenged in the moment. And this is the contradiction worth sitting with. A woman who told the world she was leaving royal life to protect her family from intrusion and surveillance was, simultaneously, conducting her own version of exactly that, inside the private homes of the people she was about to leave. The Queen and Angela Kelly. The most headline-grabbing element of this story involves the late Queen herself. The suggestion, picked up and amplified in certain corners of the media, is that Meghan may have managed to record the Queen in private conversation, that the Queen was reportedly concerned about the possibility of being secretly recorded, that somewhere, potentially, there exists audio or footage of the monarch in an unguarded moment. It is a compelling story, and it is being used, quite deliberately, to generate interest in a narrative around Meghan possessing material that could embarrass or destabilize the royal family. Here is what I can tell you from sources with direct knowledge of the situation. Angela Kelly, the Queen's most trusted personal dresser, confidant, and companion of decades, was present throughout. On the occasions when Meghan and the Queen spent time together, Angela Kelly was a constant, watchful presence. Angela Kelly did not become the Queen's most trusted aide by being naive. She understood people. She read rooms. She was, in every meaningful sense, the person whose job was to ensure that the Queen was always properly protected, not just physically, but in every other way. The idea that someone knew as going to slip a recording past Angela Kelly in the Queen's presence at a moment that would be meaningful enough to use is, to put it diplomatically, far-fetched. The Queen herself, by all accounts, understood this entirely. She was not frightened by the possibility. She was not lying awake worrying about what might have been captured. She understood, with the clarity that comes from 7 decades of navigating impossible situations, that even if something had been recorded, it could not be used. And that brings us to the part of this story that almost nobody is reporting: the legal reality, why none of it can be deployed. Let us be very precise about this, because the legal dimension is where this whole narrative collapses.
And as many of you know, she and Harry got very sort of aggrieved when they looked around the spaciousness of the apartments that William and Catherine had got.
Recording someone in a private space without their consent is, in the United Kingdom, a serious matter. But even setting aside the question of consent, the question of what can actually be done with such a recording is where the real story lies. The voice of the monarch belongs, in legal terms, to the crown. It is not a piece of audio that can be published, broadcast, or used in a commercial production without express, documented authorization. That authorization would need to have been granted by the Queen herself, in writing, specifically permitting the use of her voice in whatever context it was being deployed. She did not grant that authorization. She is no longer alive to grant it. And in death, the protections around the monarch's voice, image, and recorded likeness do not disappear. If anything, they intensify, because the institution they represent remains, and the legal apparatus that protects that institution remains with it. This means that even in the most dramatic scenario, even if Meghan had managed to record a private conversation with the late Queen in circumstances that captured something genuinely significant, she could not play that recording in a documentary. She could not include it in a podcast. She could not allow it to be published anywhere without immediately exposing herself to legal action of a severity that would make her previous courtroom experiences look modest. The story being pushed that this footage exists and represents some kind of leverage is built on a foundation that does not hold up to 5 minutes of legal scrutiny. It is a headline in search of a story. The palace footage, a different problem. There is a separate but related dimension worth addressing. Beyond any recordings involving the Queen, there is the broader question of footage captured inside royal residences, rooms, artifacts, private spaces that the public has never seen. Here, the legal picture is equally clear, though for different reasons. Private residences operated under royal protection are not spaces where filming rights are assumed simply by virtue of being invited in. The principle is similar to what applies at formal investitures. The official videographer controls the footage. A guest filming on their own device does not acquire rights to that material simply by capturing it. Kensington Palace, Windsor Castle, the private rooms that Meghan moved through during her years as a working royal. Even if significant footage of these spaces exists, interesting footage the public has never seen, the ability to broadcast or publish it without authorization from the Crown Estate or the relevant household is, legally, not there. This is not a technicality. This is the straightforward application of law to a situation that is being presented as far more explosive than it actually is. Why the story is being pushed anyway. So if the legal reality makes this footage essentially unusable, why is the story being circulated at all?
But this has always gone down in history, it's always a sort of thing of the hair and the spare, it's this sort of like, well, this is what you've got. Meghan, of course, taking sort of photographic notes, thinking, well...
The answer is familiar to anyone who has followed this particular narrative for any length of time. Suggestion is powerful even when substance is limited. The idea that something exists, that there is material out there, that someone holds information that could be damaging, creates a kind of ambient pressure that does not require the material to ever actually be deployed. It keeps names in the conversation. It maintains a sense of relevance. It positions the person allegedly holding the material as someone who cannot be ignored, cannot be dismissed, cannot be fully moved past. It is leverage that works not by being used, but by being implied. And certain sections of the media, either through credulity or through their own interest in keeping the story alive, are entirely willing to carry that implication without examining the legal and practical reality behind it. The palace, for its part, is not particularly worried, because they know what the law says, and they know that anyone who has actually thought this through also knows what the law says. Privacy, wielded selectively, is not a principle. It is a tactic. And footage, recorded without consent in a private royal residence, however dramatic it might sound in a headline, is not leverage. It is a liability. The story of what Meghan may or may not have recorded inside the palace is designed to make you feel that something enormous is coming, that the ground is about to shift, that a revelation is imminent. What is actually coming is considerably less dramatic than that, because the law does not care about the headline, and the people who understand the law are not losing sleep over what may or may not be on someone's phone in Montecito. Drop your thoughts below. This story has more layers than most, and I always want to hear your perspective on it. Like this video if it cut through the noise. Subscribe if you want analysis that goes to the legal and factual reality rather than stopping at the headline. Take care. See you very soon.